This video I will be showing you how to write decimals as fractions, how to convert those decimals into fractions. Okay, so let's get started. That's the objective. And the fraction is the first vocabulary word that we come to. A fraction is a number that compares a part to a whole. So this is the main part of that definition. Okay, part to whole. That's the definition of a fraction. Decimal. A decimal is a number that contains a decimal point. Any number that has a decimal point in it, that's going to be your definition for a decimal. Alright? And then we have the decimal place value system. That's what it's very important for us to know in order for us to be successful in writing decimals as fractions. Okay? And this decimal place value system begins with the decimal, and it moves to the right and it also moves to the left. And I'm going to be referencing this quite a bit, and there's going to be a video on my teacher webpage that you can go to review that concept. It's actually going to be called the place value system. So make sure you look for that video if you need more information about the place value system. Alright, but right now what we need to do is we need to look at four things. We need to look at a model, a decimal, the words, and the fraction. Okay, so these are the four things that we want to look at. To model 0.7, if we have the place value for that, where that 7 is sitting at, that 7 right there, I'm going to zoom in a little bit more so you can see it really clear. And it's adjusting to the zoom. There it is. So now that 7, that's the decimal place, the place value of the tenths place. So we read that as 7 tenths. Okay, in words, that's how you would write it. In fraction form, is 7 over 10. Okay, so it's really easy to go from a decimal to the fraction by knowing the place values. If you know the place values, then you're going to be really successful at changing these decimals to fractions. Okay, now the model, you can't really see it because this copy, we did not copy very well, but I'll go ahead and highlight it for you. If you have 10 squares to model 0.7, that just means you're going to have 7 tenths, 7 out of 10. So you would highlight or color in or shade with your pencil 7 of those squares out of 10. That's the model. Okay, these are the steps that we're going to follow. Here are on your notes. We are going to write the decimal in the place value chart. Okay, so there is a chart on the back of this page that we're going to be using. You're going to read the decimal using the place value chart and write in word form. And then we're going to write the word form as a fraction. And finally, we're going to simplify the fraction to the lowest terms. So here we go. Turn the page over. Step 1 is to use this place value chart. Notice that inside, let me see if I can zoom in all the way. That's as far as I can go. But in this place value, you start with the decimal point. Okay, if you go to the left, you have the ones place. This 6 is in the ones place. Okay, that means that if I don't have anything else except for that 1 6 in the decimal, that's worth 6 ones. Okay, if you're talking about money, that'll be 6 $1 bills. Okay, if you go to the next one on the left, if you open up that 2, that's the tens place. That means that you have 2 $10 bills and 6 $1 bills. That's, let's see, 10 plus 10 is 20, and then 6 more is 26. Oh yeah, that's how you read that number, 26. See how easy that is? Same thing for hundreds. 5 would be 5 $100 bills, and 7 in the thousands place means you have 7,000. So you would read this number as 7,526. Now let's talk about the other side. If you only have the 8, cover that up. That means that you have only 8 tenths or 8 dimes. If you're talking about money, we're talking about dimes. This is because a dime is worth 10 cents. and that's why it's in the tens place. So this would be like having 8 dimes, that would give me 80 cents. Now if I have 80 cents plus 3 more cents, that's hundreds, it's in the hundreds place. Well, that's like pennies, and pennies is worth 1 cent. So you have 3 of those, it would be 83. Okay, and so forth, thousands and then 10,000s. And I cannot give you the example in money when we talk about thousands and 10,000s, because the money only goes as far as hundreds. All right, so now let's talk about this decimal that we need to put into the place value chart. The first one is 0.7. So I'm going to write it in my place value chart. Here's my decimal point, and my 7 is right there. The next thing that we have to do according to our steps is to read the decimal. Okay, now we already wrote the decimal in the place value. Now we have to read the decimal using the place value chart. Okay, so let's read. If this is the place value of the tenths, then we're going to read this as 7 tenths. That's it. It's not that hard. Okay, so we're going to write it in word form right there next to that decimal. So we're going to write 7 tenths. And after you write down 7 tenths, step number 3 says we have to write it as a fraction. That means 7 out of 10. And in this case, we cannot simplify. We cannot divide the top number and the bottom number, the numerator and the denominator, by the same number. Okay, because 7 is a prime number, and 7 does not go into 10 evenly. So therefore, I'm finished. I'm going to box in my answer. And I know that's the simplest form. Okay, now the next one, 54.9. Okay, let's write it in a place value chart. 54.9. The decimal, remember, is right here, which says decimal point. So my 54 would be 5 and 4. The 5 is in the tens place, the 4 is in the ones place, and it's 54.9, so the 9 is in the tens place. So this would be 54 and 9 tenths. That's the word form. So I'm going to write that down under, or right beside my decimal. 54 and 9 tenths. Okay, now that I have that in word form, all I have to do is write it as a fraction. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit so we can see a little bit more of this paper, and I'm going to let it refocus. There it is. Okay, so now I'm going to write it as a fraction. 54, that's a whole number, 54. So I'm just going to write it as a whole number. And then 9 tenths, that means 9 out of 10. So we actually don't end up with just a fraction, we end up with a mixed number. A mixed number is a number that has a whole number and a fraction that goes with it. And that's my answer. Again, I cannot reduce, I cannot simplify this fraction, because there is not a number that will divide 9 and 10 evenly. Okay? So now let's look at the next one. 0.38. And if you talk about 0.38, we're going to talk about it in the correct vocabulary. We're going to use our place value chart. So again, 0.38. You can put the 0 in front if you would like, in front of the decimal. You don't have to, but you do have to put the 3 and the 8 in the correct place value. So 0.38. Again, we're going to read this correctly, and we always read the last place value. In this case is the hundreds. So it's going to be 38 hundredths. That's the way to read it. So that's what I'm going to write over here in word form. 38 hundredths. And notice that I do THS at the end, because that is, the 38 was to the right of the decimal. So make sure that you have that 38 hundredths with the THS. Okay, now I'm going to write it in fraction form. 38 hundredths, that means 38 out of 100. So my fraction is 38 over 100. Now I know both of these numbers can be reduced because 38 it ends with an 8 and this one ends with a 0. So both of them can be reduced because I can simplify them by dividing by 2. They are both even numbers. And anytime you have an even number, you can always divide by 2. Okay, so that's exactly what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do that in red so we can see where I am actually going to simplify. And if I divide the bottom by 2, that's the easy one. When I divide by 2, 100 divided by 2 is 50. And 38 divided by 2 is, well, let's think about this. You can do it on paper or you can just reason through it. 38 is almost 40. And if I divide 40 by 2, I know half of 40 is 20. So I know it's not going to be 20 because it's just a little bit below 40, that 38. So I know it's going to be 19. And that's the simplest form because 19 is a prime number. Okay, and that's how we do these problems. So now it's up to you to do the rest of the problems. Notice that the last two problems, the last two examples, you're going to have to write it on the tens, hundreds, and thousands place. So when you do your fraction, you're going to have to put it over 1,000. Okay, this one we use the hundreds place, so we wrote the fraction over 100. On this one, the last place that we had was a tens place, so we wrote it over 10. Over here, you're going to be writing it over 1,000 because this is the tens, hundreds, thousand. And same thing with this one. Okay, notice that this problem right here has an 8 in front of the decimal, kind of like this one over here that we had a 54 on. So remember that this 54 is a whole number. That's the number that you write big in your final answer, in your mixed number. So remember, this is going to be a mixed number when you finish, and you're probably going to have to do some reducing, some simplifying on all three of these. So let's see if you can get to those correctly when you get to class tomorrow. We'll check to see if you knew how to do those correctly. Okay, for any more information, you can always search on YouTube for different videos on converting decimals to fractions, or you can also use Khan Academy. Thank you.